if we were a separate nation, and I'm not suggesting that at the moment. So the message in Davos is, we're here, we're not giving up. The United States Climate Alliance is still on the move. And the reason is this is happening is because this is a tipping point, as the Vice President described. It's a tipping point where in the same week in Seattle, where the Cascade Mountains were on fire, and ash was falling on Seattle under the hoods of people's cars, and it's never happened before in the history of Seattle. People could see visually what is happening in their own lives. At the same time, we realized that we have the Western Hemisphere's largest manufacturer of carbon fiber that's going into electric cars. So this is a tipping point moment. That's why the politics is changing so dramatically in the United States. And the last thing I want to say, I'm so optimistic. We finally have Al Gore showing a little passion on this subject. So I'm very happy. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I appreciate your leadership.
Actually, Vice President Gore, if I could just ask you, you're taking off from that, the fact that you've been displaying so much passion on this subject, has it sometimes become a liberal versus conservative issue in the United States? Is that part of it, that certain people will say, we're going to be climate change deniers just because Al Gore feels strongly on the subject?
No, well,
or that liberals feel strongly on the subject. I mean, is that at all a possibility?
No, I don't think so at all. And in fact, there's been extensive social science research in the U.S. that definitively disproves that meme. You know, in my home state of Tennessee, there's an old saying that if you see a turtle on top of a fence post, you can be pretty sure it did not get there by itself. When you see the persistently high levels of climate denial in the United States, unique and among all nations, you can also be pretty sure that didn't happen by itself. The coal companies, coal-burning utilities, oil and gas companies, some of them, have spent hundreds of millions of dollars pursuing the same blueprint that was innovated by the tobacco companies decades ago when they were faced with an existential threat to their business. They hired actors and dressed them up as doctors and put them on television to falsely say, I'm a doctor and there are no health problems associated with smoking cigarettes. That's what they have been doing with a huge amount of money. They've created a major cottage industry of climate denial. But you know what? They're losing badly. The percentage of people, over 2/3, who agree with the science that we have to do something has been steadily increasing. A majority of Republican voters, a plurality of Trump supporters agree with the science, agree that we have to do something. And there is a major new participant in this debate who is more persuasive even than Jay Inslee, and that's Mother Nature.
Right.
Because these climate-related extreme events, every night on the TV news is like a nature hike through the book of Revelation. People are connecting the dots on their own.
Right. Governor Inslee, are they connecting the dots? Or when you see a snowstorm, exactly what you said that President Trump might do when he gets out here, there are extreme snowstorms in the US for the last month and a half. There were hurricane after hurricane coming in, in the last, over the last summer. Are people in the United States connecting the dots and saying something seems to be happening to climate?
You cannot overstate how rapidly this is happening. And it's both frustrating and energizing in this regard. Because when the Vice President started to try to educate the world, and he personally has educated the world, you cannot overstate his impact in this regard. But when he started decades ago, and I asked him to come to talk to my Congress, and he had incredible graphs, persuasive parts per million presentations, and ocean acidification and pH levels. And these graphs were extremely impressive to me because, I'm interested in science. But this is not Al Gore's graph anymore. It is ash on the hoods of the cars in Seattle that people have never seen before. Now, a visual image in a person's life is 10,000 times more mind-changing than any graph ever invented, and that is going on. That's what I'm talking about. You mentioned this issue of Democrats and Republicans. We are starting to see the potential cracking of this wall in the Republican Party. And this is a very beneficial thing. And it's very interesting. 8 Republicans in California voted for Jerry Brown's cap-and-trade system. And I went and met them, and I asked them, why are they doing this? And the leader of the Senate said it was simple. Our party, we concluded, was going to go extinct if we didn't pull our heads out of the sand and had our tail feathers out in the air anymore and start to get involved in this solution. And why? It's because this generation that's coming up behind us is 99% in favor of doing something about this. So if you want to have a viable political party, you need to start engaged in the solution, and that's why it's starting to happen. And that's some of the best news about this issue right now.
Paradoxically, the fact that we are starting to see some of the actual impact of climate change is one thing for Vice President Gore to be saying inconvenient truth. This is about to happen, but as he's saying, when you actually start to see it in your daily life, that's when political pressure starts to build up on governments also to say, hang on, if you're not going to fix this, we're not going to vote for you. And that's when governments start to act.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if I could speak with each leader at Davos, I would just implore them to connect those dots, internalize it as a human being. Because I think people are starting to connect those dots. That's why you're seeing court cases, and the desperation in some ways, because especially youth they see that it's their future. But every leader here at Davos has to connect those dots. Some of them are, but I don't think the majority are. And that's where the pace and the scale of change is needed. That's where we have to step it up. Because if we don't step it up, we'll have these nice incremental things, but it's not going to cut it.
Could I just add one thing? We had 1.5 meters of rain in Houston, Texas, the center of the global petrochemical industry. Puerto Rico is still devastated 4 months after another hurricane. We've had the worst fires in the history of California, mudslides killing people. And the same week that Houston was underwater, almost a third of Bangladesh was underwater from the extra increment of the downpours of the monsoons. Now, here's the point. The scientists predicted all of this. They told us this was coming. The fact that their predictions have been proven correct should cause any reasonable and sane person to pay sufficient attention to their predictions now about what is going to happen if we don't stop using the sky as an open sewer and dumping 110 million tons of heat-trapping pollution into it every single day. The cumulative amount there now traps as much extra heat energy in the Earth system every day as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs going off every day. It's a big planet, but that is a lot of energy, and it is disrupting the ecological system of the Earth upon which the flourishing of humanity depends. Our generation cannot say to Rizalot's generation, it was just too hard for us. We couldn't think clearly about it because we were tweeting or because we were playing games or we were watching Dancing with the Stars. We have a moral obligation. We have a business imperative. We have a political responsibility. And I'm sorry, I'm getting passionate again.
Well, please, I think on behalf of all of us here and on behalf of the planet, please keep getting passionate about it. It's really required.
If I can highlight the human dimension of that. Just last month, I was in Bangladesh and I was at my brother's home where I met this woman who works in their home as a helper. And she was telling me that in the rains that you were referencing, her family lost all of her crops. And it was record rainfall that hadn't happened in the last 35 years. And that is the human element, because she was from a pretty affluent family in her village, but she had to, out of desperation to support her family, come to the city and work in people's homes. So that's the individual dimension of millions of lives that
and you can multiply that story hundreds and thousands of times, maybe millions of times, and if we're not careful, we'll be multiplying it 1 billion times or more if we don't do something about it.
Just to finish that thought, your point about your generation's responsibility, I can guarantee you that if you don't meet this challenge in the next 3 years, well, may your children find it in their hearts to forgive you.
All right, Anand, just want to shift focus to one other area of possible hope, right, which is technological change. Technology to some extent did this to us with, carbon, with coal-fired plants and, oil and gas and the rest of it. Could technology solve it? For example, many countries, India included, China, saying that we're going to phase out all oil and gas vehicles by a certain point of time. No more fossil fuels will be used in cars. It will all be electric. You're one of the largest, vehicle manufacturers. Is that something which you see happening? And could that sort of a change really save the planet. We just won't have the internal combustion engine by 2030.